Promise made, promise kept. Under the leadership of the Minister of Labour, we have introduced the Making Ontario Open for Business Act, which will repeal the job-killing parts of Bill 148. At the same time, we are maintaining the standards that protect vulnerable workers. Speaker, we are also fixing the skilled trades mess that left businesses unable to find skilled workers and young people unable to find jobs in the skilled trades. For this reason, we are shutting down the College of Trades. Mr. Speaker, we promised we would put an end to hallway health care. On behalf of the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, we are proud to once again report progress is being made, promise kept. We are building 6,000 new long-term care beds in communities all across Ontario, and we have another 9,000 new beds in the pipeline, which will be delivering to those communities that need them the most. And in advance of the upcoming flu season, we're investing $90 million to create 1,100 beds in communities across Ontario. Mr. Speaker, we promise to restore trust, transparency, and accountability in government. On behalf of our Premier and our entire government, we are pleased to once again confirm promise made, promise kept. There is no greater example of this than our management of the government's books. We are approaching Ontario's finances like the majority of individuals and families approach their household targets. We must live within our means, pay down our debts, and make every dollar count. Yes. We firmly believe that a government that puts its fiscal house in order is truly a government working for the people.
Very well.
A few weeks ago, our government released the report of the Independent Financial Commission of Inquiry and the results of the line-by-line review. Admittedly, the results were sobering. Our government inherited a $15 billion deficit from the previous Liberal government, a staggering amount of money. 15 years of reckless spending and mismanagement by the previous Liberal government left our province extremely vulnerable to the next economic downturn, and that was irresponsible. It's this type of thinking that produces a crippling debt that, left unchecked, would devastate hospitals, schools, and the social safety net. Worse still, the previous government went to great lengths to shield the magnitude of their problem. First, they tried to mask their structural deficit using one-time revenues. Second, they used off-book accounting to make the deficit appear lower than it actually was. Finally, when those didn't work, they made a conscious decision to run billions of dollars in deficits with no credible plan back to balance. Considering this record, I think all of us, the members of this House, owe both the Auditor General and the Independent Financial Commission of Inquiry a debt of gratitude for ensuring these abuses were brought to the public's attention. Yes. Likewise, we congratulate the members of the Select Committee on Financial Transparency for their work in ensuring that these kind of abuses are never seen in this province again. To further improve legislative accountability, our government is proposing to undertake measures to expand the scope and mandate of both the Auditor General and the Ontario Ombudsman. Mr. Speaker, accountability is important, but accountability on its own is not enough. We have to fix this financial mess. And on that count, we are pleased to report that our government has taken immediate steps to mitigate this structural deficit inherited from the previous Liberal administration. Due to swift action taken by our government, we are pleased to report that $3.2 billion in savings have already been generated. Yes. But even better, Speaker, we have acted immediately and are delivering $2.7 billion in tax relief for Ontario families, individuals, and businesses. When you put those together, Speaker, in mere weeks since the Commission report, we have reduced our deficit by $500 million, so the deficit now stands, Speaker, at $14.5 billion. It's going the right way. Speaker, we have made progress, but there is still much work to be done. Our government must take a new direction. We will restore fiscal balance on a timetable that is reasonable, modest, and pragmatic. We will put in place a meaningful debt reduction strategy. We will strengthen the fiscal transparency and accountability measures enshrined in our laws. We will ensure that every government agency is delivering services effectively and providing value for taxpayer money, and I thank the President of the Treasury Board for his leadership. Whether it's something as straightforward as removing the telephone landlines and fax machines from our government offices, or something as significant as focusing OHIP Plus on the kids who actually need it, the opportunity to rethink government is immense. Make no mistake, after 15 years of Liberal negligence, the road back to balance will not be easy. But we are setting Ontario down a path that will restore fiscal health, preserve critical services, and support hardworking individuals and families. It is our plan for the people, and it is truly a balanced approach to governing. Mr. Speaker, our government's position is non-negotiable. We are committed to making life more affordable for individuals and families and putting more money back into their pockets so they can get ahead. And nobody in Ontario deserves a tax break more than low-income workers. Personne d'autre en Ontario.
This is why no one else deserves a tax break more than low-income workers.
We are proud to stand here today and announce that our government is introducing a new low-income individuals and families tax credit, or LIFT for short. It is one of the most generous tax cuts for low-income workers in a generation, Speaker. It will benefit 1.1 million workers. The vast majority of low-income workers who earn $30,000 or less per year will pay no personal income tax in Ontario. That's zero. People can choose to use these savings to pay their bills, pay for groceries, or pay for anything else. And we invite the opposition, if they believe likewise, to vote with us in favor of the bill that we just tabled. For a growing number of people, the prospect of affordable accommodation is getting beyond their reach. Individuals and families are facing an affordability challenge simply because housing supply has not kept up with housing demand. In response, our government has committed to develop and implement a housing supply action plan. Thank you, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Thank you to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. For your housing supply and action plan. I'm sorry, Steve. This will address the barriers that prevent the development of ownership and rental housing. We will also reintroduce a rent control exemption that will apply to new rental units in order to increase housing supply across the province. To be clear, rent control will remain in place for existing tenants. Mr. Speaker, you're still chuckling. Got to have a little levity on these days. Mr. Speaker, in order to pay for the services we all cherish, we need a stronger balance sheet and a stronger economy. We must create an environment where anyone can start a business, grow a business, and create jobs right here in our province.
Yes.
Earlier, we touched on the proposed Making Ontario Open for Business Act. Now, here are some of the next steps. And it starts with red tape. You know, it's outrageous that Ontario is currently burdened with approximately 331 statutes and more than 380,000 regulatory requirements, while British Columbia somehow manages to get by with less than half of that. So the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade is currently heading an effort to cut red tape across the entire government. He's well on his way, we're all well on our way, and we will further reduce red tape for businesses by 25% by the year 2022. Mr. Speaker, prosperity must reach every corner of our province, and that includes communities in rural and northern Ontario. We will work with private sector partners to expand natural gas and broadband networks to even more rural and remote communities, and we will finally develop the Ring of Fire. No more platitudes, no more delays. Instead, our government will work directly with our First Nation partners in order to realize the long-awaited benefits. We're also moving forward with our resource revenue sharing agreements to create a win-win situation for northern towns and Indigenous communities and mining, forestry, and aggregate companies. Mr. Speaker, our government has decided it will not stand in the way of any project that would transport oil from Western Canada to Ontario or Canada's East Coast. We are pleased to announce that Ontario will lead by example. In order to further national interest, we will unilaterally relinquish our veto over new pipeline construction within our borders. It's time we work together as part of one great nation and get the pipelines built.
Let him go. Let him go.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we currently have a federal government in Ottawa that is determined to impose a carbon tax on the people of Ontario, no matter what. It does not matter how many concerns Prime Minister Trudeau hears from seniors, families, and small businesses. He is determined to make the people of Ontario pay. Ontario is proud to join a growing coalition of Canadian provinces opposed to the federal carbon tax framework. That's one that includes Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and New Brunswick. The Premier has made it very clear he intends to fight the carbon tax with every tool in his toolbox, and that includes legal challenges. We want to congratulate the Attorney General for her leadership in fighting the carbon tax in both Saskatchewan and here in Ontario. And today, we are proud to share the next steps and the next tools we will use in this fight. Our government is actively exploring a full suite of transparency measures that will ensure every single person in Ontario is informed of how much they are paying in federal carbon tax. Every time you pay a home heating bill or every time you fill up your car, it is our intention to let the people know just how much money the federal government is taking out of your pockets. In conclusion, the current state of Ontario's finances is of significant concern. The previous Liberal government's reckless spending and mismanagement left an unprecedented burden on the shoulders of all individuals and businesses in Ontario. The fiscal hole is deep. The road ahead is not an easy one and will require difficult decisions. Everyone across the province will be required to make sacrifices without exception. However, Speaker, this is also an opportunity to embrace reform and transform how government serves the people. Our path forward is clear, and that is why it is important to maintain our resolve to pursue fiscal discipline and ultimately restore our books to balance. We gladly tighten our own belts now, knowing it will provide this generation and future ones with the secure, prosperous future they deserve. Nous vous assurons que notre gouvernement n'oubliera jamais qu'il se bat ici entre.
We can assure you that our government will never forget what we're fighting for within these four walls.
Who we are fighting for within these four walls. It is and always will be for the people.